Hello everyone, Russ of Aquarimax here. It is, to adjust that light just a second, that's really looking pretty bad. There, I think that's a little better. Let's probably for that. I usually have that taken care of before the live stream starts. I'm pretty excited today. Oh, Rosie McLeod, indeed you are first. Thanks for joining us. Looks like we've got several people popping in. Nice to have you here. And oh, we've already got a like. Thank you. That's awesome. I haven't even done anything yet. And I already got a like, so I'm pretty excited about that. Paul Kuntz, hello. Seems like you both joined us last time. It's great to have you back. Genius21, sup? Nice to have you here. Got quite a few people in the chat already. Pretty fast. I've got some pretty fun news. TMPS is here as well in the house. Thanks for joining us. One thing that I'd like to mention is that I have a new line of Aquarimax t-shirts that I have just created, and those are on Teespring, and I'll be talking more about those in an upcoming video. I'm pretty excited about the designs. I've been able to use some new technology to, well, not new technology, but new to me, that's enabled me to do some fun stuff with the t-shirts I couldn't do before. So I'm excited about that and hope to show everyone. As you can see, I've got my feathered friend Twilly here on my shoulder to join us. He may not be fielding any questions. I'm not sure he feels up to that. He's kind of asleep. So Paul Kuntz says, do you sell isopods? I do. I do indeed sell isopods. Quite a few different species. I keep 19 species. I don't necessarily sell all of those yet, but I will be. But many of them I do sell. And a good way to find out more about that is to go to my YouTube About page, or you can go to aquarimax.com and then go to the contact page, and then just I will email you a price list. So that's the best way to find out more about it, but you can certainly ask questions if you have them right now as well. All right, excuse me, I need to turn away from the microphone as much as possible. Okay, Potato Derp says hi. Paul Kuntz says, should have told me, I just bought 3 more species. Ah, yeah, I try to let people know, but I need to probably talk more about it. I love parakeets too. Johnny Huerta does as well. And I've had quite a few over the years. A couple of them have spoken. This is one of those that speaks. So it's fun to have him around. He's very friendly too. So he's actually, he belongs to my daughter, but he likes everybody. So that's great. TMPS says, let me know if you've ever be willing to sell some P. Hoffman's egg eye. I think Captive Isopoda took down that little note they had about shipping to Canada. Interesting. Well, I hope in the future to sell some. In fact, I'm going to. But I don't know if I'll be able to ship to Canada or not. That can be tricky, but we'll see. But I, in fact, have a waiting list for P. Hoffman's egg eye already, and good thing they're producing. I'm glad to see that I'm having success breeding them. The babies are getting bigger. It's fun to watch them. They're starting to look like the adults. You can see the pattern a little better, but still much, much smaller, and there's no dimorphism. You don't see longer uropods or longer antennae in them yet. Potato Derp asks, oh, Genius21 says, get him to speak. Funny thing about this one, I did have one that I trained to speak on command. This one, he does not know how to do that yet, but hopefully he'll just choose to start piping up in a minute on his own. He often does that, so we'll see. Potato Derp says, how closely related are mantids to Grillidae? In other words, cricket family. They are somewhat closely related. I mean, you get some argument on this, but the roaches and the mantids are very closely related. Apparently, it seems kind of interesting. I never really thought of it, but a lot of people say that a mantis is basically a very derived predatory roach. They're very, very closely related. If you look at their oothecae, their egg cases, for the roaches that produce egg cases that you see, they are quite similar. It's interesting. So so crickets, I guess, and mantids are related because roaches and crickets are related. And Johnny Huerta says, you are the only person who can pronounce my last name on the first try. Jamie Bonani's here, welcome. And Ashraf Waji says, have you ever had a crash in a shrimp colony? If so, how did you bounce back? Let me think about that for a minute. I'm trying to remember if I've ever had one. Not that I can think of. I will think about that a little bit more and see if I can help you out with that one. So did you have a crash in your shrimp colony, Ashraf? Genius21, do you own ants? I'm new. I have owned ants. I had a colony with a queen. I started out with 3 queens. I'm not even sure what species it was. This was quite a while ago, maybe 17 years ago or so when I started it. And had it for about 3 years. I collected 3 queens, put them together. They started producing workers. One of the queens killed the other 2 queens, but the colony itself did really well. It was kind of a fun project. I built the colony out of an acrylic box with holes that I drilled into it, and then I used aquarium airline tubing to make tunnels between the acrylic box and some test tubes with corks and rubber stoppers and things like that. And some of them I just filled with water and then plugged it up with cotton or polyester fiberfill, things like that, so that they could have a place to drink. And other ones I left empty, which they filled up with their various rooms, you know, nurseries and food storage areas and all kinds of stuff. And it was pretty interesting. And I would add on little bits to the tubing. It was an interesting colony. Paul Kuntz says, just built 10-gallon Isopods tank with lots of ferns and mosses. It's awesome. Oh, that would be. That is really cool. Which species do you have in there? Johnny Huerta says, have you ever owned Pandagara? If you have, what is your experience with them? I haven't. I met some Gara pingi pingi. Is that the name of that species? The ones that are often used to, sometimes called the pedicure fish. I met some of those and was able to have that experience of have them nibble on my hands in a pet store. But yeah, that was interesting. But I've never kept Pandagara, no. Ethan Vandal says, how do you heat treat leaves for isopods, thinking of grabbing some new pets? Well, what I do is I just get a plastic, not a plastic, sorry, totally wrong word. I got get a glass baking dish, and I put, oh, he's saying some stuff, but it's mostly gibberish right now. Maybe he'll get some words going. I get this glass baking dish, and I wash it out, rinse it out well. Usually use a little vinegar to help rinse it out so that it doesn't have any soap residue in it. I just put it in the oven at about 250 and put it in there for at least half an hour, sometimes longer. And that is how I do it. It works pretty well. I have never had, that I can think of, never had any pests infest my isopod cultures attributable to the leaves. You know, I do get fungus gnats in the colonies, but that's not because of the leaves. They just get in there. Just curious, does everybody hear him? He's just kind of jabbering right now, but just wondering if you can hear him with the microphone the way it is. Johnny Huerta says, do you just have one parakeet at the time? Yes. And Paul Kuntz says, just wild caught. Okay, so it could be any of a number of species then. But that sounds really cool. I'd love to see it. Sounds like a really cool setup for them. Potato Derp says, my new shrimp have doubled in size in just a few days. It is very warm in there, and I shoved a bunch of food in their face. It works. Which species of shrimp are you working with now? Potato Derp works with a lot of vernal pool shrimp, like fairy shrimp and things like that, so I'm just wondering which one he's got. Rosie McLeod says, on my betta, the edges of most of her scales are black, and there's a spot by her gills that's black too. Ooh, I put in aquarium salt and started siphoning 20% twice a week instead of once. What else can I do? Well, those things may help. Is she showing any other symptoms? Like, is she acting differently? Paul Kuhn said, have you ever had bumblebee walking toads? I haven't, but I've looked into them a bit. I know that, I believe it's Josh's Frogs that breeds those, and I would love to find out a little bit more about them. I mean, I've read their article on it, and they seem like really interesting creatures, and I'd love to try to breeding them. It seems like the newly metamorphosed toadlets are tiny, and that would be fun to do, and since I breed springtails anyway, I'd be pretty easy to feed them. So I would be interested in that. Zerobot, nice bird, thank you. Yeah, he's a lot of fun. I hope he'll say something intelligible for everybody. Genius21 says, can you own another ant colony? Oh, I just heard him say his name, Twilly. So, good. Own another ant colony? I would like to. I may do that at some point. It seems kind of inevitable. I ought to try that. Potato Derp says, ghost shrimp this time. I'm starting to raise some decapoda. Okay, cool. Ghost shrimp. That is, as far as I remember, the first species of true shrimp that I kept. Well, I shouldn't refer to ghost shrimp as a species because it's a group of species, but likely Paleomonete species are a similar one, because when they collect them, they don't necessarily look up the name, and they're not really bred in captivity very in mass. They're usually collected just because they're a little tricky to breed. Robert Gear made it. Excellent. Roger's Aquarium. Are we live? Indeed we are. Lumpy Dog in the house. Very nice. Can everybody see me this time? The past few times when my face has been on camera, it's been really difficult to, we've had problems with, maintaining the chat. Well, the chat works, and you can hear audio, but not necessarily see me. But if you can see me, we haven't frozen yet, so that's great. Excellent. Thank you, Robert, for letting me know that it's working. Okay, great. I'm glad you can all see me. I'm not sure what kind of lag we're getting, but hopefully it's not too bad. It doesn't seem too bad. Paul Kuntz says you should make a video about identifying isopod species. Cool. Yeah, like the species you find, right? I think that's a good idea. I will have to get a hold of some of the more common species. Most of my species are either tropicals or fancy species or things like that. But if I need to get some pictures of some other species. In my area, I don't get that many species. I think lately I've only found, in the past few years, I've only found 2 species of isopod in my area. It's kind of dry here, so I do get a couple, mostly Armadillidium vulgare and what's the other one that I get? Cyclisticus convexus. I can find those. That's about it. I don't even get Porcellio scabber around here, at least not in the past few years. I used to find them when I was a kid, but I don't anymore. So yeah, if I can get enough pictures of those, maybe I could crowdsource the pictures. People can send me pictures of different types, and I could give them credit for helping me out with the pictures. So thanks everyone for letting me know that it's not frozen, that you can hear me. Thanks to Jamie and Ethan and Genius21 and everybody who mentioned that. Reptile enthusiast. Yes, it is a parakeet, in fact. We usually refer to them as a budgie, but it is a type of parakeet, and budgie is just one specific type of Australian parakeet. So yeah, parakeet is an accurate way to refer to them. And Ethan Vendel, lucky you have 2 species. Oh, isopods in the area. Yeah, some people only have 1, that's true. Potato Derp says, I don't know what species of ghost shrimp I have. By the way, how do you tell if they're male or female? I definitely have some females since they're way too big to be males. Well, I think from what I remember, when they're buried, they still have the same kind of shape as most other shrimp. So if they tend to have kind of a straight underside, like their tail is kind of flat, that tends to be a male. And if it's a little bit curved and more like rounded, they sometimes refer to those as skirts. That tends to be a female, because the swimmerets are adapted to hold the eggs when they reproduce. So that will probably clue you in if you can look at that and see if you can tell a difference there. Roger's Aquarium asks, Russ, what is a good isopod food? Well, I'll tell you. I'll give you some more. I'll give you some options. I give mine fish food pellets, usually omega-1, some kind of pellets from omega-1. It doesn't really matter. You can give them goldfish pellets or cichlid pellets or whatever. They like those, and that's a good protein source. And it also has, lots of goodies in there, vitamins and different things for them. So that's a good staple food. But I also give them vegetable bits and fruit bits. So like little bits of oranges. Zucchini's a great one. Sliced up sweet potatoes. I always use organic sweet potatoes myself. Lots of different things like that. Cucumber, they like that. It's not terribly nutritious, but they like it. You can give them lettuce, bits of apple. What other vegetables do I give them on occasion? Bits of carrot are good. I'm about to try out Ripashi bug burger as a food for isopods too, but I haven't used it before. And of course, I can't discount the importance of their substrate, including the leaves, the decaying leaves like oak leaves, maple leaves, things like that. I give them a lot of those, and that is a big part of their food along with the rest of their substrate. Genius21 says, when is your next live? Well, I'm going to try for next Tuesday, 5:30 Mountain Time, Mountain US time, I should say, because a lot of you aren't watching from the US. And so this same time, basically, is when I usually try to do it. I have this, not this weekend, but the weekend after that, I might do an extra one, a bonus one on Friday or Saturday. I don't know exactly when, but my wife is going to be at some workshops. And so instead of spending the weekend with her, which is what I usually do, I'm going to be working on YouTube and things like that. And one of those things may be an extra live stream, a bonus. So watch this space. I'll try to put an announcement out if I'm going to do that. Reptile Enthusiast asks, where did you get your Porcellio hoffmannseggi? I got mine from captiveisopoda.com. And I've had a good experience with them. In fact, I started communicating with Alan, who runs captiveisopoda.com, a few years ago on Dendroboards. It's a forum for dart frog enthusiasts, and he got into isopods through dart frogs. And so we communicated quite a while ago, and he was working on some interesting strains of isopods. Paul Kuntz asked, I have dairy cow isopods coming. Do you have any experience with them? That is a species I really want to get a hold of. I love the look of that species. That's Porcellio laevis, as I recall, but it is a Dalmatian form of Porcellio laevis, which get larger than Porcellio scabra and kind of shinier. So I don't have any experience with them, but I hope to. It's a species I plan on keeping at some point. But in terms of care, from what I understand, they're very similar to other species. So Ethan Vendel says, do isopods need fruit and veggies or just leaves? They can subsist on nothing but the decaying leaves, as long as they have enough of them and they're in the right state of decomposition, but fruits and veggies give them a boost, so I do prefer to offer those. Potato Derp says, there is one scrawny shrimp with a more straight tail. I think it is a male. I hope so, because I want shrimp babies. Oh, good luck. I hope it works for you. They are a little bit tricky to breed and definitely tricky to get any of the, well, not so much tricky to get them to breed in terms of producing eggs, but in terms of raising any of the babies, it's tricky. I may have mentioned in a previous live stream, I've done it, but it's not easy. Reptile Enthusiast, thanks for answering my question. You're welcome. Happy to help, and I'm happy to answer more questions if you have them. Robert Gear says, what species of isopods would be recommended for a hermit crab tank? Quite a few, actually. You could go with Porcellio scabra, you could do Armadillidium vulgare. Those are some common ones that people can collect and use. Some people keep some of the smaller tropical species with them. You could do Spanish orange isopods. There's a lot of options there. Apparently, I've heard of people using Armadillidium maculatum, the zebra isopod. So you've got a lot of options. Luke Koo says, best place to get a mourning gecko. Well, where are you located? If you're in the States, you have a couple of options. Outside of the States, I'm not sure. That might be a little bit more difficult. But if you're in the United States, you can contact me to get on my waiting list. I have a pretty long waiting list, but okay, San Diego. That is not too hard to do then. We could work that out. If you want to go to my About page, you can you can send me an email and you can get on my waiting list if you'd like to. I think Josh's Frogs carries them sometimes, so that could be another option. They're a little bit difficult to source on occasion. They're sort of a boom and bust sort of thing. But I am trying to, I mean, I always have them and they're always producing, but I'm always selling them off. So right now I've got somewhere between, I want to say 3 and 5 small hatchlings, but at least 2 of those are spoken for, and I'm going through working up the shipping with that, deciding on a ship date and stuff for those. And the other 2, someone else is on the list. I think I have maybe 4 or 5 people on the list right now, but if you want to get on the list, that would be fine. Okay, so Reptile Enthusiast, what is your routine for isopod keeping? Okay, good question. Well, first I set up the enclosure. I'm working on some new substrates. The substrate that I'm working on now is based on one by Mickey M on Arachnoboards, who uses it for millipedes and isopods, conceivably. But you can do a lot of different things for substrate. It can be as simple as cocoa fiber with top dressing of leaves. That was the first one I ever used, and it works. It's not as good as some of the others, but it works fine. So if you want to start out with a basic one, you get some cocoa fiber, and then you put some leaf litter, which you do sanitize. It's good to sanitize it first. I like to use oak and maple as my base leaves, but you can use some other hardwood leaves too, as long as they're not toxic. I put in decomposed ones. If you go into a forest and dig into the leaf litter and find some leaves that are partially decomposed already, that's better because they can already start eating them. If they're not like that, it takes time for them to start breaking down. So put that in. I love to use cork bark as a surface for them to hide on and climb on and so on. Cork bark's great because they don't really eat it, so it lasts a long time. You can also put other non-toxic tree bark in there like oak and maple, which I often do too, but then they end up slowly eating it. And then I make sure that there's always a moist spot there in the enclosure. It's good to do that at least a couple times a week. Just check on the moisture levels and see how they're doing. You never want it to dry out completely. If it's an Armadillidium species like the roly-polies, like Armadillidium vulgare, a common one, or closely related species, they like it a little drier, but they should always have a moist spot they can retreat to. And then you just start feeding them. You start out small. It's usually a customary number to start with is about a dozen, but you can start with more or fewer. It doesn't really matter, but that's a good number to start with. They can slowly build up numbers. You can slowly adjust food levels as they breed and so on. For ventilation, it's good to make sure that Armadillidium species, the ones that need to be drier, need higher amounts of ventilation. So I usually cut a few holes, maybe 1 inch to 1.5 inches in diameter, circular holes, and then I cover that with a very fine fabric so that they get better ventilation. With the other ones, I might just drill 1 or 2 small holes in there, cover that with fine fabric, and I'll often hot glue it or I'll tape it on so that fungus gnats don't get into the container, because fungus gnats inevitably attempt to get into the container, and they will if you don't do something to remedy that. They also like a little calcium, so a little broken up cuttle bone for birds is a good source of calcium for them. And then I feed them a couple of times a week usually, in addition to the substrate that they have in there. So little bits of fruits and vegetables and fish food pellets are my staples that I like to use. Hopefully that helps. Genius21 says, do you have other pets or planning on to have another? Well, I do have a lot of pets, and I do plan on getting other pets as well, yes. Some things, I don't know if you saw my recent unboxing when I got centipede and mantis, a golden giant Asian mantis, and also got a couple more millipedes. I'm planning on branching in, getting a few more millipedes soon. Some Spirostreptus species 1 is one that I'm working on. I'm also going to do hopefully some blue velvet cherry shrimp. They're not really called cherry shrimp when they're blue velvets, but it's the same species. Some blue velvet shrimp. I'm hoping to do that, and I'm going to get a 29-gallon tank, hopefully, in which I will put the blue velvet cherry shrimp and some more of my endlers, because my endlers are overflowing, and I need to put them somewhere. Okay. So those are a couple of ideas. There are others too. I've got a few ideas. Potato Derp says, not only cherry shrimp are always sold out around here, but I was looking for a more challenging shrimp to breed. I always like how ghost shrimp always swim around more than they walk. Yeah, I always call it helicoptering. They remind me of a helicopter for some reason. Okay, Paul Kuntz says, I watched all your morning gecko videos. Your tank looks real nice. What size is it? Well, I've got 2 morning gecko enclosures right now. One is a 12 by 12 by 18, so it's 18 high and 12 inch footprint. And then I've got one that is an 8 by 8 and 12 inches high. And those are both of my morning gecko vivariums. Roger's Aquarium asks, do isopods need a heater? Well, most species do not. Most do great at room temperatures. And in fact, I wouldn't say there's any species that absolutely requires one, but a couple of species do better if they're kept warmer. And the Armadillidium klugi, or the Montenegro species, does well with some extra warmth. And so I keep them close to my cricket bin heater so that they get a little bit of reflected heat, not directly because that would be too much, but a little bit of reflected heat, and that seems to work for them. And I also keep my dwarf white, my Tricorina tomentosa isopods in the same area so that they get some of that reflected heat, and it seems to be good for them. Let's see. But in most species don't really need it, and any species, room temperature is pretty good. So, sorry, got lost in where we are in the chat. There we go. Gordius is in with us. Do Armadillidium eat the white fluffy mold? I'm not sure that they do, but in general what I found is they eat the things that the mold would grow on, and so they tend to beat the mold to the punch if you get enough of them. So they're good at preventing it, not maybe so good at destroying it. TMPS found a cellar of P. hoffmannseggi in Canada. Excellent. Cool. I hope you're able to get some. Familian Lake, do you have any interest in keeping freshwater isopods? I thought it was nice and might do it again. Yes, I have done so. I kept Acellus aquaticus years and years ago when I was like 12 or 13 when I found them. There were some in a local ditch, and I was just setting up one of my aquariums. Not my first aquarium, that was my own aquarium, maybe my second aquarium that was just mine. And I collected some, put them in, and they reproduced in there and lived in there for quite a while, along with my platies and other creatures. So yeah, it was fun. Potato Derp says, ghost shrimp remind me of helicopters too. I think it is because they can hover in place and blow the substrate around as they do so. That makes a lot of sense. That would be what it is. That's a good way to put it. Luke Koo says, how do morning geckos do with dart frogs? I have 2 imitator thumbnails in an 18 by 18 by 24 and tinks in a 10-gallon vertical. Well, this is my experience. I tried that for a little while, tried keeping it with my Dendrobates leucomelis or my bumblebee dart frogs. I didn't like it, and I'll tell you why. It was mostly because of the lid, the way the lid worked, and also because of ventilation. I feel like, morning geckos need a little bit more ventilation than dart frogs do. And so maybe and I know people run their dart frogs at different levels of ventilation, but I feel like morning geckos at least benefit from a higher degree of it. And I also feel that the lids are a problem because to keep a lid that provides enough ventilation for a dart frog, keeps enough of the humidity in for a dart frog, it's often a problem for the morning geckos, partly because they like to lay their eggs up against that area where where the lid is, so it can cause problems. The eggs can get crushed and things like that. The morning geckos themselves can get crushed with the lid and so on. So I don't really like to keep them together. Some people do it, and it probably depends a lot on how your lid works. But I would say I have decided not to do it. I don't do it anymore. I tried it for a little while and it didn't really work. So for me, and that's not to say it couldn't work for others, but I probably wouldn't recommend it myself. So M2410 says, love those birds. Mine died a few years ago because of stress after she laid an egg. Oh, sorry to hear that. Yeah, they are lovely little things though. I love having birds around. Gordia says, oh well, the little piece of wood I found for my wild isopods has mold. Okay. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's hard to say whether it is or not, but hopefully, springtails will tend to eat mold a lot more than isopods, and if you have springtails and isopods together, then that will often take care of it. Reptile enthusiast, have you ever kept any beetle species, and if so, what advice would you give for a beginner? I haven't kept many. Let me think about it for a minute. The only thing I can think of is mealworm beetles and buffalo worm beetles. Those are the only 2 species I can think of, and they're not. Those are not pet species really. They're just feeder species. So I'm not sure that is going to be really helpful for you, unless you're interested in keeping those and you haven't yet, and then I can totally help you. But I think those are the only 2 species of beetle. Well, that's not true. I've also kept rice flower beetles, but that's another feeder species, so I don't know if that's helpful. And bean beetles, I keep thinking of them. Okay, I've kept bean beetles as well, another feeder species. So I've kept at least 4 species of beetles. But that might not be what you're looking for. Robert Gear, how many African cichlids should be kept in a 50-gallon tank? Ooh, good question. totally depends on what type of African cichlids. Because if you're talking about like multis from Lake Tanganyika, you could probably keep 50 in there, maybe more. If you're talking about like mbuna, probably fewer. And it also depends on the species of mbuna. Like you could probably keep yellow labs, a male and some females, and then if you're removing the young periodically, you could probably keep that going for a while, as long as they have good hiding places. But yeah, that could be, so yeah, it totally depends on the species. If you're keeping a mixed mbuna tank, what I have understood is that a 50 is a little too small, but some people can manage to do it. I once had an mbuna tank, the 55-gallon mbuna tank, and I felt like it was too small because I did have mbunas beating on each other and so on. I did get reproduction and things too, but I did have some of them beating on each other a little bit too much. I did have some fatalities in that tank. And that's probably not just due to the size, but it could be a contributing factor. And Potato Derp says, forgot to tell you, my strange strain of brachynechtid packardi drove itself to extinction. The recent generations were very aggressive and killed each other. Wow. Did you get any eggs from them before they did? Because that sounds like a really interesting strain. I wish I could have recorded them. The location they're in has bad lighting, so I didn't get around to it yet. I had no idea they would start killing each other. Whoa. Yeah, Down the Wormhole says, just got the notification, dang it. Yeah, I guess I'm a little late. I'm running late, and I have somebody coming over to buy isopods in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to have to cut out in a second here. But everybody keep watching. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really glad that people will continue to come back to the live streams, and I hope they're fun for you, and I always enjoy them. So Quadro asks, could we see your pets? You know what, the most recent animal tour I did was back in the summer. That's when I only had 4,000 subscribers. It was the celebration for 4,000. Now I'm not far from double that, which is really exciting. But you can check that out if you do a search for Aquarimax Animal Room Tour or Animal Tour, Aquarimax Animal Tour, you'll see those. Not all of my pets are in there, but a lot of them are. And I will plan on doing another animal tour soon so you can see more of my pets. Reptile Enthusiast says, can you keep different species of isopod in a communal tank? I would not recommend it unless the tank is very large and has a lot of varied habitats, because one of them tends to outcompete the other. One species tends to, but the bigger the vivarium and the more varied the habitats, the less that happens. For example, in my 20-gallon long leopard gecko tank, we have powder blue isopods and zebra isopods, and they seem to be coexisting. But for example, if you put dwarf whites with oranges, they'll both reproduce, but the dwarf whites will do a lot better, and the oranges will not reproduce very well in that situation. So that's the summarized version, I guess. Potato Derp says there were eggs for his fairy shrimp, but they all hatched at the same time, and I think you know what happened. Yeah, I guess they got eaten. Well, I'm going to let Twilly have the last word because he's really excited about talking. So, you going to say something for us? Nothing intelligible, so I guess I'll have the last word. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and I'll see you soon. Make sure that next Tuesday at 5:30 U.S. Mountain Time, you're ready for the live stream.